Okay, hey, um, so it's January 5th, and I've kind of like been stuck, since January 3rd on my third section of reading, which was supposed to be when Adam and Eve sinned, the man and woman sinned. So this is Genesis 3, verses 1 through 24. So this is the fracture, okay? So this is when sin enters the story. And I've kind of like been stuck on it. It's just been a lot. So it's been me, this journal, ChatGPT with all my like endless questions. And it had just gotten to the point where it was just so much to write. It was just becoming overwhelming. And so it's not perfect. But I wanted to talk through it because I want to get through more. So here it is, right? So this is what happens in Genesis 3, 1 through 24, okay? So first off, all in all, Genesis 3 is showing what happens when trust breaks in a relationship that was built for love, and what the world becomes basically when humans choose self-rule over shared life with God. All right. So this story, when sin is introduced, it explains why humans struggle to trust, why shame feels instinctive, why hiding feels safer than honesty, why relationships are hard, and then why the world is good but fractured. And it does this through these series of events. So it kind of moves from doubt to choice, to shame, to hiding, to blame, to consequences, to mercy, right? The promise, okay? But still to exile. So this is what happens, okay, in the story flow. So the serpent entered, and the serpent questions God's word. So the serpent's first move is like actually subtle, okay? Because the serpent doesn't force anything. The serpent questions, okay? Did God really say? And by doing that, it destabilizes trust. Because what happens here is the serpent didn't come through with any new information, right? It didn't introduce anything new, because the command was already known between Adam and Eve. So the serpent basically reframes it so it sounds restrictive. So this then makes it seem like God is implied to be withholding something good. So what's actually happening here is not this transfer of like information. It's actually an assassination or an attack on God's character, because now God's word is made to be suspect. Now it's made to be questioned. And then this desire shifts from trust to like self-protection. So God basically goes from this trusted source to now this potential obstacle. Okay. So then Eve and then Adam eat from the tree. So Eve, right, in the Bible it says like she sees the fruit as pleasing to the eye. It is good for food, but it is also now desirable for gaining wisdom. And none of those things are like evil or bad like on their own, but the real problem is timing and authority. So wisdom is taken than rather being received. And independence has now been chosen over trust. Okay. And then the man, he eats too, willingly. All right. So the tree actually represents moral authority. And that is the power of Adam and Eve, which is humans. Okay. The power of us to define good and evil for ourselves. Okay. So they wanted this elevation, but what happens is they actually experience fragility, right? They actually become much more fragile, because now awareness, shame, and fear enter the chat. So both of their eyes were open, and then they realized they are naked. So nothing physically actually changes with them, but now it is the self-perception. Because before, they are naked and unashamed. They are fully known and they are safe. But now after they are self-conscious, they're covering, they're hiding, they're in fear. And shame arrives like an unwelcome guest. Shame does not have to be taught here. Like, it's instinctive. It immediately comes, okay? So that makes me think about us now, how, we talk about my nervous system, how my nervous system react and my body react. Like, this is biblical. It's already written. Okay? So then blame now replaces the trust, because God comes looking. All right. Even though they're hiding, God comes looking. Okay. And God is like, where are you? And this is not a location question. It's a relational question. And this, of course, like, makes me think about myself, because when I'm feeling shameful and like isolation for real, I, draw back within myself. And with that, right, the whole where are you, God is still seeking relationship, because God still comes looking for them. Okay. And with that, the humans, they respond with fear, blame, and deflection. The woman you gave me, like, it's everybody's fault. Okay. So the responsibility now, it fragments, right? When we're thinking about what a fracture is, misalignment, okay? And now the trust between the humans breaks too, because Adam is like, the woman you gave me, you sent her here. And then the serpent you put here, okay? So there's that. And with that, then comes the consequences. And everybody has a specific consequence. And I'm going to get into what their consequences are, because I was like, why are the consequences what the consequences are? They are not random. Okay. And they are actually meant to describe basically like just how distrust, it ripples outward. Like, life is now distorted, because like once trust is broke, like it breaks systems. Okay. It's not just about the behavior, not like it's about an entire system being broken, right? Because now intimacy is broken, work is broken, power is broken, the ground itself is broken. So creation is still here, but now harmony is gone. Okay. Now, the humans, they do get expelled from Eden, okay? But they are still clothed by God. So the humans created like their own clothing, but God clothed them even better, right? It's kind of like how, you think you coming up, you trying to, patch up or fix something, with your little Band-Aid, and God come and do like the open heart surgery and go ahead and wrap all of that up. So before sending them out, God clothes them, and then they leave Eden. Okay. And the reason why is because it's not about rejection. It's just about the limitation to prevent eternal brokenness, because they ate from the tree of the knowledge of like good and evil, but he didn't want them to eat from the tree of life too, and then live forever like in this brokenness. Okay. So he doesn't want that to happen. They can't eat from the tree of life and then live forever in a fractured state, right? So there's this shift, like from innocence we go to responsibility, from safety now we go to struggle. But it's not, oh, we were worth something and now we're worthless, like we're not worthy anymore. That's not what it is. Okay. So what it means though now, in getting into the big ideas, is sin begins with distorted trust, not ignorance. So it's often like thought about Adam and Eve sinned because they didn't know better. And that's just not true, because they did know what God said. The serpent doesn't introduce new information. He just reframes it. So God seems restrictive and untrustworthy, and God seems self-serving. And what's distorted is God said the tree would bring death, and the serpent then suggests that God is withholding something good. So the issue isn't about lack of knowledge. It's really who to trust. And this was a big one right here. Sin starts when God's character is doubted. Sin starts when God's character is doubted, not when the rules are misunderstood. So it's going from, is God really for me? That becomes, I should decide for myself. And that's what we do. That's what I do. This is what I'm doing, and we'll see what happens, rather than, is this what God has for me? Or what did God say? I know what God said for me. And it turns it into choosing for myself. And then the next big theme here is humans grasp autonomy instead of relationships. So autonomy is self-rule, self-definition, and it's independence from authority. And relationship is trust and dependence and a shared life with God. And you got to think, shared life, God was walking amongst the humans in the garden. Like, he was with them. He was there. Ordinary everyday life. Okay. So before this happened, humans received life, meaning, and boundaries within relationship. Obedience flows from trust. Obedience flows from trust. And I think about that every day, like being a teacher and things like that. Like, when kids trust you, they're going to do what you, they're going to do what you, they're going to do what you say. They're going to do what you ask for the most part. And before Genesis 3, like, God is present. And then so what happens is, after the serpent's lie, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So it's not about curiosity. It's actually about control. Okay. Because now I get to decide. Now I get to know. Okay. So it's about wanting to define right and wrong themselves and wanting to be their own independent moral authorities, like outside of God. And so that's what autonomy is there. And the tragedy of that all is they was already made in God's image, but instead of living with God, they wanted to live as God. So sin isn't just breaking a rule. It is replacing relationship with self-rule. Okay? So, and it sounds harsh, but it is. I don't want to trust God's wisdom. I want the final say. And we say we want to trust, like I say, you know what I'm saying? I want to trust God, but it's like, y'all already got my mind made up about what I really want this to be, you know? But that's not seeking God and like just trusting what it is, what God says it's gonna be. Because I know a lot of times with myself, like, it'd be like, dang, but what if I don't like what God say? That ain't what I want. I want this thing. I think about when the boys be arguing over like a truck. It's like it's 5, 10, 15 million other trucks in the room, but you want that one. Just because you want the final say. Okay? So yeah, that's that. Now, another big theme here is shame is a result. Shame is not the intent. So they didn't eat the fruit to feel shame. They ate it to gain the wisdom, the power, the independence, and shame shows up uninvited. So shame is actually the symptom of broken trust. Shame is not the goal of sin. It is just it's just what comes when trust is broken. Because God never says you should feel ashamed. So God asks questions, God seeks them out, and God still clothes them better than what they were able to clothe themselves. So shame actually comes from ruptured relationship. It is not God's desire to humiliate. So sin, it promises all of these things. It promises empowerment, but it actually delivers isolation because it draws you back. Okay, it draws you back. We've introduced fear. Now we've introduced awareness, all these other things. So while you want to be elevated and lifted up, it actually makes you, it shrinks you. And when I think about the things that I am like truly ashamed of, like those are the things that make me feel tiny. And I don't want to be with people. Nevertheless, like I don't want to dwell with God about it. So yeah. And then next thing, God, he holds the people accountable, but he still remains merciful. So it shows, Genesis 3 shows both that truth is named, consequences are real, but God does not abandon. And that makes me think about the type of parent that I aspire to be. God seeks first. God speaks directly. God covers shame, right? God limits damage. God preserves life. And so accountability is not humiliation. And the mercy, though, it does not erase the truth. Like, this is it. This is what happened, okay? And now, the separation from Eden, because they are sent off into exile, it prevents eternal brokenness, though, because leaving Eden is painful, but it's also protective. So they are sent out so that they do not eat from the tree of life and live forever in this broken state. Okay, this is not exile out of anger. It's just a limitation, and the limitation is out of mercy. The garden is closed, but the relationship is not erased. And what this explains about life is just like why the world is good but broken. And then these roots of guilt, fear, conflict, suffering. But it still introduces hope because God does not abandon humanity. It's still this broken relationship that God seeks out to repair. Okay, so it's not just about like a single mistake. All right. So then I get into like, well, why would God just allow the tree in the first place? Like, why the tree just had to be there? And asking that question, we get the answer that the tree represents real choice. Why? Why you got to give them a choice? But without the tree, obedience would just be automatic, which means love would be programmed and trust would be meaningless because it would just happen. Okay. So what the tree is, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it represents moral authority. So who gets to decide what is good and what is not? God isn't testing intelligence. God is allowing humans to choose. And this be my struggle with myself, right? It's trust. Are you choosing trust with God or self-rule? And it be me, like I be feeling like the only good decision I done ever made was to attend Alabama State University. You know, it's just like, why give me the choice? Like, please just choose for me, because I don't be making good choices. But that's neither here nor there. And then now, so why God allows the tree? Because love, trust, and relationship, they only exist when they can be refused. And I had to ask, like, what does this even mean for real, for real? Like, what does that mean? And it was like, love is not love if it's obligatory. So if trust cannot be withdrawn, if obedience cannot be questioned, if the relationship cannot be left, then what exists is control and not love. And for love to be real, it must be freely given. It must be freely sustained. It must be freely rejectable. Yeah. And so Adam and Eve, they are basically created as responders to this. Oh, excuse me. So, yes, I trust you, God, or no, I will decide for myself. So, the possibility of refusal is what makes trust meaningful, right? Because if I trust you, and I'm trusting you with my heart, with my life, with my this, with my that, I trust you. And it's just, certain things you won't do when it comes, like if that trust, if all of that is like there. Hey. And then, so what this basically means is the tree is not a trap. Because that's what I felt like. That's a setup. Like, it's a setup. But traps are hidden and deceptive. The tree is clearly named, it's clearly bounded, and it is clearly explained. So there is no trick. The tree is what makes trust visible. So without the tree, obedience would be automatic. The relationship would be untested, and trust would be theoretical. It would never happen in practice. So if it were a trap, it would remove choice. The tree actually creates choice. All right. And then when we get into it, why the tree is there, the tree is the cost of freedom. So freedom is not just doing anything at all, having no limits, being autonomous from everyone. That's not what it is. So freedom actually is the ability to choose trust or self-rule. I like that, because when we talk about God setting us free, like being free is having that ability to choose trust in God. And freedom is also the capacity to remain in relationship or not. Okay, that is freedom. So freedom with that, it always includes the possibility of misuse, the risk of harm, and the chance of rejection. Okay, so the tree actually exists because freedom exists. The ability to choose trust or self-rule. Now, God creates humans capable of love, which means humans are also too capable of rejection. So the same capacity that allows humans to love God also allows them to turn away from him. So you cannot have one without the other. So if humans could not reject God, our love would not be chosen and the trust would not be real. Okay, so what this really shows us, Genesis shows us, is that God values chosen relationship. You choosing to be in relationship with me more than guaranteed loyalty. So God actually accepts the risk of being rejected rather than forcing relationship. And that's crazy, because even through rejection and all the things, like, God's still there. And it's crazy that God, accepts that risk. And, humans, like, we struggle with rejection. Like, we call it crashing out, like it's cute and all that stuff now. But that, I was finna say that shit ain't, but it's, But God accepts that risk of being rejected rather than forcing a relationship. And then this risk, right, of rebellion is actually the price of genuine relationships. So rebellion here is not just rule breaking. It's the choice to say, I will define good and evil for myself. And that this possibility only exists because humans are trusted with freedom. Humans are treated as moral agents. Humans are respected as Partners, not property. So if God eliminated the risk of rebellion, God would eliminate freedom. God would eliminate love. God would eliminate real relationship. So so this is actually showing us that God would rather suffer rejection than have a world without real love. And the pain of this is the cost that God was willing to bear to have genuine relationship with humanity. Okay, so this part of Genesis 3, it introduces these themes of broken trust between humans and God, fractured human relationships, and a world still loved but no longer whole, and God still pursuing humans rather than abandoning them. Now, every judgment is relational. God speaks directly, okay? When giving the judgment, God still clothes them, but God limits the access to the tree, okay? So this is about God still being good, still trying to restore broken relationships. And then everything after Genesis 3 is God repairing what trust lost, okay? So this kind of explains why the salvation is needed. All right, before getting into the how behind it. All right. Now, what happens here, and I'm sorry that this is so long, but it was a lot. Like, it's just a lot. I had so many questions. So then it brings up like the whole, well, this is why isolation hurts. This is why shame is so powerful. This is why we long to be known. But these are the answers to it. So this is why isolation hurts. It is not good for humans to be alone, right? It contradicts design. Humans are built for mutual presence, not self-containment. Why is the shame so powerful? Before, they were naked and unashamed. After they realized the nakedness and hide, okay, nothing physical changes. The self-perception changes. But shame is not guilt. Guilt is I did wrong. That's not what shame is. Shame is something is wrong with me. I am unsafe to fully be seen. And shame is powerful because it corrupts relationships, not just behaviors. It messes up so much more, right? And then this is then why we long to be known without fear, because Genesis 2 actually gives us the design memory. To be naked and unashamed, to be vulnerable, okay? Without fear of rejection, all of those things. We were made for full visibility without fear, and longing for that is not, it's actually not weakness. All right. So then this gets into the why we struggle to trust, why the shame feels instinctive, why does hiding feel safer, why are relationships hard, why is the world good but fractured. So why we struggle to trust. So trust breaks before action. So God's character is questioned. So now trust everywhere becomes fragile. Why the shame feels instinctive. Shame appears before condemnation. Okay? It is a protective reflex when safety is lost. When safety is lost, that is when the shame appears. And now I want control, because now I want to feel secure. And now I need to be able to But it all leads back to the shame, because when that safety is lost, the next thing we reach for is control. And then the hiding feels safer than honesty, because honesty feels like exposure and loss of control. And hiding then feels like protection. And this is why relationships are hard. Blame now replaces unity. Power enters intimacy. Fear accompanies vulnerability, right? And then why the world is good but fractured. Creation remains good, but now everything includes this resistance, this pain, this distortion. And I like how it is defined here. Fracture is misalignment. It is not total destruction. Okay? Now, this last piece, because I really had to get into why were these consequences what they were. Okay, why were these consequences what they were? So the serpent undermined through deception. Okay, the serpent tried to elevate itself as the source of truth and actually pulled humans downward away from God. So the consequence, on your belly you will go, you will eat dust, ongoing hostility with humanity, right? So now the serpent, right, is brought low. Okay, deception leads to degradation. All right, it's degrading. It becomes a sign of what degrades rather than what elevates. And now the serpent is now going to lose moral authority. So ongoing hostility is going to continue, right, between the enemy, because conflict is introduced by deception. By deception. The enemy, the serpent, the whatever information, it's nothing new that is it is deception. Doubt, bringing you low. All right. So the one who, corrupted trust in the first place, it no longer stands as a guide, and now it becomes something that humans like recoil from. Okay. No, drawback, withdraw. All right. And then the woman. Okay. So this now is why pain enters relationship and creation, because what she was reaching for was wisdom, insight, influence, shared authority. Right. Again, none of those things were wrong individually, but okay, it was taken apart from trust. So now her consequence, right, is the pain, childbearing, all right? Life itself now comes through pain, okay? Now there is relational tension. Desire and power have become distorted. You're going to desire your husband and he's going to rule over you. Does not mean a woman is cursed. Pain is punishment for being a female. God endorses dominant. That is not that, okay? What it is doing is naming this tragedy, that the place meant to bring life and connection, a woman, this place meant to bring life and connection, relationships, intimacy, it now includes pain and struggle. And why that makes sense is because when trust breaks, okay, the intimacy, it becomes risky. And intimacy is deep relational closeness, okay? It doesn't stop, but now it requires courage. Power dynamics enter, okay? When trust is gone, control, again, becomes this substitute for safety. And then love is mixed with fear and vulnerability, okay? What was meant to be mutual now has become strained, all right? Because fear, the fear, it doesn't mean that love is false. It just means that love is now costly, all right? And then with the man, he was tasked with cultivating and guarding, and he did not guard. So now his consequence is the ground is going to resist. Work is now going to become exhausting. Survival now is going to require struggle. Death now becomes unavoidable. Work is not cursed. It's just the ease of work is. And independence now turns purpose into pressure. But it's still mercy inside of all of this. God still clothes them again. God limits the damage, because I'm not going to let you just stay alive all this time in this brokenness. God preserves life, and even the exile is protective. And I feel like I say that all the time. Like, sometimes thank God that we don't get the stuff that it is that we be wanting. You got to thank God for it. Okay? So, the most important thing to notice is that even throughout all of that, God still seeks first, speaks directly, names truth, covers shame, limits the damage, and keeps humans alive. So it's not about abandonment, but it is God refusing to let the wounded relationship be the end. So it explains why we struggle. This is why. It's not accusing us for struggling, but this is why. Okay? And I know it was a lot. It was a lot. It's January 5th, and that's what I got. This is what I've been working on. I hope this explains some things. Yeah. And I'm going to keep on keeping on. I'm going to keep on posting.